All right. Well, we don't have a fighter to talk to, or a coach to talk to, or a promoter, but we have someone just as interesting, someone who has captured my attention. I said, you know what? I got to talk to this guy. You know him as the UFC translator extraordinaire. I think I'm pronouncing this right, Fabiano Buskei. Did I get your last name right?
You got it perfectly. That's great. Great. That's perfect pronunciation.
Fabiano, I want to talk to you for a long time. This is fun. Let's put a couple of the pieces of the puzzle together here. So you are fluent in English, you are fluent in Portuguese, you are fluent in Spanish. What am I missing?
You're missing what I say the half. Because I say 3.5. You're missing Italian because of the fact that I'm a half Brazilian, half Italian citizen, which is like so many millions of Brazilians are, millions of South Americans. But one thing is lack of practice. Obviously, practice makes it perfect. And the second thing is that no one, I think, is fluent in Italian unless they really, really delve into it, because it's Italy's second most spoken language, because everybody speaks a dialect first. So everybody's got so many accents. But I did well. I actually spoke to Alan Amadovsky this past Wednesday during media day. And I was complimented on pronunciation, and that he was surprised. It's like, you have a Roman accent, but I just found out that.
That's interesting. All right, so like, what is your story? Because you're half Brazilian, half Italian. Where did you grow up? Like, how did this get to a point where you could speak this many languages?
Okay, so Italian citizenship, basically, but born and raised in Brazil. There until I was an exchange student in America. Came to the United States around 17. I was an exchange student south of Buffalo, went to Penn State, then started working for Disney. So that's a whole thing. Obviously, the languages really ramp it up. There's nothing better for you to recognize your Latino heritage, especially we're going into Hispanic Heritage Month. I think is important. Then you come to America, and this is the second largest Spanish-speaking population in the world, to Mexico. It beats Spain. It surpassed Spain a couple years ago. So I rediscovered myself as a Latino. I concentrated on I was good at pronunciation, but at Penn State, I was already taking classes, and I got really involved with the Puerto Rican community there. Got to work with the Puerto Rican Student Association for 4 years, fell in love with the island, had a Puerto Rican accent 20 years ago, had to go back to Brazil. I actually moved back 3 months before 9/11, obviously, which made it completely difficult to come back here. Ended up staying there for 10 years, and 1 year there, trying to close business, trying to negotiate in the hardcore Caribbean Spanish that I had. I looked in a mirror one day. I said, well, you are blonde. You're from Southern Brazil. You're half Italian. And you're kind of cocky. Oh my God, you're from Argentina. So I made the decision. I changed the accent, and it really fits me well. Everyone from Argentina, one of my proudest moments was actually going to Argentina for the first time ever. And they always ask me for how long had I been living there, meaning in Brazil. And I was like, I'm from Brazil. No, but what's going on? So confusing people was something that when you speak a language well and you confuse people, that's mission accomplished. So that's why I got the Spanish. And English, the reason why I learned English is because of football. I fell in love with football when I was a kid.
American football, you mean?
American football. We obviously grew up with soccer. I see you have a jersey from the evil empire in your yeah. We have to make a choice. We have to make a choice as Brazilians. You have to be Madrid fans or have to be Barcelona fans. Obviously, there's a much larger contingent now of Atleti fans, of people that kind of, they liked what La Coruña was doing in the 90s, or because of Brazilian that was playing there, or something of the sort. But basically, is a conscious decision. And it pains me to say, as someone who's grown up as a Barcelona fan, that it is lovely to watch what has happened, as sad as it is, and it's just it's beautiful. What the soccer that's been played by Real Madrid in the past 10 years is insane. You hate to love teams that you don't want to root for. It's what they say between Brazilians and Argentinians, that Brazilians love to hate Argentinians, and Argentinians hate the fact that they love Brazil.
I'd never heard that one. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm sorry you chose the wrong team, but I will say you've got Rodrigo playing well for Madrid. You've got Vinny playing well for Madrid. Militao on occasion is pretty good. There's a strong Brazilian contingent over there.
But you know, my favorite player, that Benzema. It's love that man. Just love Ben. I just love Karim Benzema. I love. There you go. There you go. I mean, how can you not? Plus, we kind of hated Cristiano Ronaldo for quite some time. What's this nonsense? You're trying to be a Ronaldo. We already have two. And man, you admire the first in, last out, the work ethic, the fact that that man can go up for a header more than anyone in society. And you just love the teams. I think that it's been great. I mean, the level, the games, and you start appreciating. I think it's what happened to me as an Eagles fan. When we won the Super Bowl, I'm Brazilian. We say we for the team. I had no participation in it. When we won the Super Bowl, I was at a Philadelphia bar in Orlando, the Eagles bar in Orlando, the Wing Shack. Following day, I'm at Disney to see Nick Foles. I was a cast member for a long time, annual pass holder, had to be at the Magic Kingdom to see Nick Foles. And a weight was lifted off my back as a fan because I grew up on that team. I saw a lot of suffering. I've always wanted this to happen, just so I could see everything, so I could love the game. And I've become a much more neutral football fan since, obviously, watching the Cowboys train wreck every year is a pleasure. But it's just even with soccer, I watched Brazil win 2 World Cups. I'm sorry to say, I'm looking for storylines now. I've wanted the Netherlands. I want Holland to win a World Cup. Love when Spain did it. Love this new team from France. Would love Belgium to win one. You start rooting for storylines. I think I'm adulting now. That's what I'm doing.
You're definitely adulting a little bit here. So let's back up a step. So obviously your native language is Portuguese. You learned English before you came to the States. I'm guessing through school or something like that, right?
Yes. I've always said I've had the privilege, the resources, the education, the love from my parents. I've had the opportunity. I focused on that. I noticed that I was good with emulating sounds. And I learned it before. So when I came, when I came as an exchange student, people said, "But are you from Canada?" Because they were like, "What's going on?" Which again, confusing people when you speak another language is great. When you confuse the locals, you're like, "Yes, I did it."
That's interesting. Okay, and then you picked up Spanish here around your time when you were a college student. Is that right?
Yes, that's around that. So very quickly as well, it always helps when you have a base language. So if you speak Portuguese, you obviously have a good base for Spanish, and that was a matter of you having it. I mean, you have the pronunciation down. So I was just very fearless with languages. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. If I make a mistake, and I've always been fascinated by the nuances. So like, this is an inside joke of a language of like, oh my God, it's fascinating. Like a simple thing, right? At the end of sentences, people from Chile say, "Cachai, cachai." I'm like, when I got it, I was like, it's like, did you catch it? Did you get it? I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is great. Like the languages kind of melt each other. There are elements of different languages. So I just, the bases were good. Having that base. I learned German when I was a teenager. I made an executive decision not to learn French. Well, cut to 25 years later, I don't get to go to Paris for the UFC. Bummer. Should have chosen the other language, but I learned German, and there was a method from this older gentleman who ended up passing away a couple years later, that if you learn 300 words of a language and you practice them, you are able to carry on conversations and then increase your vocabulary from there. In 30 days, intensively, I was going there every day, Monday through Friday for 3 hours. I've always believed this. This is my pro tip I've seen a lot of language learning. Go for immersion. Go for full immersion. Music, forget what you're doing. Oh, but I was just reading the book. Music will help you, and it will be your downfall. Because, oh, but I want to listen to my music. Don't listen to your music. You listen to the music from the other countries. Programming, for 2 years before I left, the only thing that I watched on Brazilian television was soccer. And just for 30 days, all I did was consume German content. And this was a long time ago, before like the internet. And in 30 days, I felt like I was carrying on conversations. Obviously, the practice has gone away, but I feel that the memory was there. I'll listen to certain things. It's like, oh, I can make the structures, and I continued to learn for a couple of years. But the immersion, I always go for immersions. I've every time I delve into something and pretended to be from there. I've acted before. I actually had 10 years of commercial acting in Brazil. And the first time I had an audition, the guy just asked me, "Did you ever act?" I said, "Listen, I've been in the corporate world for years. I speak multiple languages, and I try to blend in with the locals. If you don't call that live acting, I don't know what it is, man. I'm different people to different people." I was like, that makes sense. You get the audition.
So what did you speak in your house at home when you grew up?
Portuguese. My parents don't speak another language. My father passed away years ago, but my family does not speak other languages. No one.
So where did the Italian come from?
Self-learning as well. Self-learning.
At what point in your life?
Adult, and as an adult, I started dabbling in it because working for Disney, you get contact with people from Epcot, right? So you got at Epcot, you have the pavilions at Epcot for the countries, and that was the first time I actually had contact with real Italians from Italy. A lot of people claim to be Italian, right? But they're Italian something. There's a difference between, the Tony from New York and someone who's actually a Giacomo from Rome. Like, listen, this guy, yes, all right, their pizza is a little different than yours. So Brazilian Italians are just as phony language-wise as others. I mean, they're not known for speaking Italian. Everybody claims to be Italian. Done that myself. When we have the passport, why not? But it's actually like a running joke in Brazil. People are like, "No, I have Italian citizenship." It's like, dude, that's not a pass for anything. That doesn't get you anything. And they make a lot of fun of that. But I try to own it. And friends from Italy and people from Italy have said that I've done a good job when I needed to speak. You just have to concentrate because it really confuses you. Like going from a language to another. If you're in the learning phases, you might. I mean, you can't take two roads to the same place, right? So you can take one and then take another. It's a little complicated, but adulthood. So in order: Portuguese, English, Spanish, and Italian.
See, that's interesting. My mom passed away a long time ago. She spoke a bunch of languages as well, but the difference was she grew up from birth, she grew up in Beirut in the 60s. Okay. Oh. So you had to know a bunch just to get around. You're like one of the few people I've ever encountered that picked up one or two extra into adulthood. What is the tricky part about? I mean, for people who are adult learners trying to pick up on a language, you say immersion is that, but let's say immersion's not readily accessible. What is the key to doing whatever else you can?
Okay, and you said your mom grew up in Beirut, Lebanon?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. One of the largest Lebanese communities outside of the Middle East is actually in Brazil. Every time it's when people say Middle Eastern food here in the United States, I call it Lebanese food. So that's how we call it in Brazil. So, speaking to your point about adult learning, I've done adult learning in many other ways in different capacities in the corporate world. So you have that pyramid of learning, which some people will contest it or not, but in general, I mean, it says that you pick up, 5% if you just hear, or you pick up 10% if you read, if you 15% if you read, and it goes all the way down to 90% retention when you teach other people to do it. So when you have to teach, not that you actually get to the teaching itself, but imagine if you're trying to explain La Liga to someone that was born in Middle America, never followed European soccer. And all of a sudden they watch a game, they're like, whoa, they watch El Clásico. They're like, oh my God, what's this? Try to explain to them what La Liga is. Try to explain what Real Madrid is. Try to explain. You will delve deep into things and you will learn more to prepare yourself to teach other people. So one thing, you can immerse yourself, even it's not readily available. And I do agree with you. We have to be very mindful of people not having resources or time in their lives. They might be busy. You might not have the resources to actually go into a course, but there's so much available for free today with an internet connection and a basic screen in front of you. You can definitely listen to music from the countries and get into translating, and you have to make concessions. So again, you have to make sure that the content you're consuming is feeding on your language learning. So I know it's hard to do anything during football season because it just, takes over our lives. But I mean, I try to be productive from February to August as much as possible. So you are not going to watch as much content as you wanted in the language. You are going to substitute it with content from the other country. You're going to read articles. You're going to start following people. You're going to pick up and be curious. I've always been a very curious person. So one of the things you can do is, no matter what you're seeing something, you don't go. It's like I've always compared it to actually when the first time you go into a job in a new city. You're taking a car. You go from point A to point B. Talking about a city, not a town, like something that has options. You start noticing in about a couple of weeks that you're just taking the same way all the time. Why not take the scenic route? Why not take the back way? Why not get off the highway? Why not? In a lot of big Brazilian cities, you have to do that because the highway system is not as optimal as here. So with languages, vocabulary, you hear this word that you're going to use a lot. When you catch yourself repeating it, go for the other ones. Go, what are synonyms of it? Like thesauruses are great for that purpose, and you can find that on the internet. But consuming content, making sure consistency is very important. Every night or every day. Don't cheat on yourself. You're cheating yourself if you're not learning. But consume as much as possible, and just really try to do everything that you can to substitute whatever you're doing in one language for another, because there's an end game to it. You have to always ask yourself, what is your why? We always talk to the people like, I always get to be, if I'm fortunate enough to be in the interviews with a lot of athletes and stuff. And obviously we see the work that's been done by Project Rock with the athletes at the UFC, and they have the interviews, and they always ask towards the end of the interview, what is your why? And I think it's very important. It's kind of catchy. You get a lot of good responses to that. Why are you learning a language? What is your passion? I found a passion. It was football. I found another passion. It was people. I thought it was music instead of, no, it's people. Love my continent. Love the Americas. In Italy, just the culture. But obviously, you have to. You cannot. There's the food. There's the life. There's the way they are. Find a show. Today is easy. You go into any streaming platform. You go to Netflix. You go to Prime Video. You go to Hulu. You go whatever. Paramount Plus. You have Disney Plus. You can always find content in different languages on YouTube as well. Subtitles. Now you have the benefit of the I do dubbing as well in different languages, and the amount of stuff, like using the example as, let's say, one streaming platform that you can go in there and look in the other languages that you have the subtitles for. I watch stuff with subtitles even in English because of the fact that we have such a short attention span. Myself, blamed guilty right here. You're doing something, you're getting a sip of something, you're eating all the time. Aren't we eating in front of screens all the time? You're doing something, and all of a sudden, you might not catch what they said. But it's the whole learning pyramid thing. Like you're adding the visual component. And for me, it doesn't bother me. It's second nature. For a Brazilian that grows up down there, we are so used to having subtitles all through our lives that to us having something below the screen, having a caption to me, having a ticker is not an issue to me. So I've done a lot of that. Go for the hard route. You're going to watch a show? Put it in the original language. It's going to take you twice, 3 times. But what I watched, if I told you the content that I watched on VHS when I was little, like there were tapes I worn them out because I watched those shows so many times. Prime time, Chris Berman, Tom Jackson, Ron Roberts, Bill Pito, go back all the way, Stuart Scott. I used to tape prime time and watch prime time all week long until like Saturday, pretty much, when I was watching college football. Shows on TV, like some of my family members, I ended up having people in the family that moved to Philadelphia. They're a separate story. It's unrelated to the Eagles situation. My late dad's sisters moved to Philly eventually, and they would send me tapes of American shows. I got everything from Full House to like, I don't know, Alf or Punky Brewster, like everything in English. I was consuming those same episodes 1,000 times. So repetition, and talk to yourself. Be crazy. I've talked to myself in different languages. Every time I want to learn a language, I'm like, okay, every thought I'm putting into my head is like, I'm trying to think in that language. I'm talking to myself. Like I'm assessing situations. If you're doing people watching, and I live in Las Vegas, used to live in Orlando, right? You do a lot of that. I did that, and I did people watching in another language. I spoke to myself in another language. It helps. Whatever
That's
you can.
interesting. So a buddy of mine is Brazilian. Now he's Brazilian and American. He got citizenship here.
Yeah.
He told me that the first time he ever really felt like he was fluent, like when he was kind of comfortable in it, was the first time he ever fully dreamed in English. So let me ask you, what language do you dream in?
Okay, that's well. First of all, congratulations to your buddy on American citizenship. Each person has a different route to a different path and their different journey. I actually applied for citizenship recently, about a week ago, so it's going to be a process, a long process from when I started. It is true. It's mind blowing to wake up in another language, especially if I have like that nightmare. It all depends. I've had that question asked before, and I would say to you that it depends on how strong the content that you consume, and I hate to use the word content again, but what were the interactions that you had in the past, especially when you interact with different languages, right? So when I'm interacting with a lot of Brazilians and had like a whole Brazilian night, I ended up consuming or watching news or watching content. I ended up having a couple of dreams in Portuguese. In Spanish, I mean, I go out a lot with everyone from from UFC in Spanish and ESPN Deportes as well. So it depends if you're consuming that content, if you're watching shows. There is a show called Gomorra that's available on the streaming platform. It's actually it's depending on the country that you're in, but Gomorra is considered to be one of the best shows in Italian history, right? So they had 4 seasons, put a movie out, and then had a 5th season. It's all in Napolitano. It's all in Neapolitan. Italians have to watch it with subtitles. One of my great friends is from Abruzzo. She's from 3 hours away from Napoli. She gets a couple of sentences. Her husband is from Milan. They live in Milan. He needs the subtitles. To my point of the dialect stuff, yes, Gomorra is done in complete subtitles for Italians because it's all in Napolitan. Like, it became a fever. Everybody started learning the terms. There's so many cool sentences. It's very similar to some stuff that resembles Portuguese. Some resembles Gallego as well, like some of those mixed languages in Europe. I was watching Gomorra on like repeat. So I was going to bed and I actually had a couple of dreams that people were speaking to me in Napolitan. So it depends, but it gets into a messy situation because you dream. This is the curious part, and I'm not sure if you heard this, but this happens. And I'm sure some people will relate. You dream of people and of situations that did not happen in the country that you're in, and definitely did not happen in the language that you're speaking, but you dream of your mom who doesn't speak English, speaking English to you. You dream of an ex-girlfriend who's American speaking Portuguese to you. You dream of your Hispanic friends that don't speak Portuguese in Brazil at a bar. Like, it's a mix. You start putting stuff in a box and it gets shaken and you go to bed. So it's not just about the language. It does, again, to your friend's point, the languages start coming in, but it's a mess and a half, man. It's a mess. It's crazy. Last night I had a dream with my mom. It was kind of all in English. I was like, what? I woke up in the middle of the night. What's going on? Like, it's weird. People speaking different languages. It's like a bizarre world. It's like a bizarro situation.
Yeah, like a what if kind of moment. All right, so
kind of.
Translation. So my mother-in-law, her native language is Spanish, but she's fluent in English at this point. Okay. She's been here for 20 plus years, but she had to take a certification to become a translator. It wasn't just a thing you can do for her job anyway. And I asked her, like, it's kind of weird, like, you speak Spanish, you speak English, what is the big deal? And what she told me was, right, you can speak English and you can speak whatever other language, Spanish, Arabic, French, doesn't matter. Even if you're fluent in both, that doesn't make you a capable translator. What is she talking about there? Why is just having fluency not enough for translation?
First of all, congrats to her. It's awesome because not only is we're talking about Hispanic woman certified translator, it's a pretty cool thing that it's an example to people. So that means that she inputs the language, and I'm sure she puts it to good use because translators, we try to just bridge gaps and connect people. to speak a language is, I mean, I know this is a very deep, I'm glad you're sitting down because it's such a deep thought from Brazil. It says, it's a quote from a proverb almost. It says, one thing is one thing, another thing is another thing. See, it's mind blowing, right? It's just amazing. So
it's tautological, yeah.
I'm sorry. To speak a language is to basically, again, start living your life in that language. You start consuming content, you start producing content, which is in you start the languages. A lot of teachers use the term produce. You put out, there's an output of English, and then you start, again, most of the times you come to the United States and you have to, like, that's a word that I see, I understand why it could be a problem in certain cases, but in others, you assimilate, right? You have the other languages, your native language. You might not have content with it. There's another deeper layer to what she said. There are people that are no longer capable after being here for a long time. Again, she works with languages, another story. But there are a lot of people, and that's a very high percentage of people that come here to the United States. And I think then that, first of all, you have to understand what kind of work experience they have in the past, what kind of education they had in the past, like back in their home countries. I think that some of my friends, from some people that I know, are completely unqualified to judge or write in Portuguese anymore. They say that, they admit that to themselves. They're like, oh, yeah, I haven't done it. I can see it, man. I'm from communications. I went to school for public relations, and I'm a lover of languages. I put punctuation in my texts, in my WhatsApp messages, like everything's capitalized properly. I use italics, so it's a different thing. I'm a little detailed about it. But there's the people that forget that too. So there's that element of a high percentage of people that have to learn another language and go and move to another country to not look back. They already don't have as much of a grasp of a language as before. I come from an era that I had to pay for cards to call 1-800 number from my phone in a dorm in Penn State to be able to call my parents. And I never knew if the minutes were going to be the same for Brazil. So one card that I bought 1 week would give me 15, another card would give me 20, another card would give me 5, and I was pissed. Well, we now have FaceTime all the time. When we're here, we are speaking as if we're in the same room, just shooting and we can have contact with our families. You can consume content from your country as if you're in your country. I like to say that you have 1 foot on each country now. I actually had to come in with 2 feet in. So I had to forget, so to speak, some stuff that was back. All right. So now you have that. At least people still have some contact with the language. The thing is, to your friend's point, the one about the dreaming, another point that people ask, when do you start thinking in another language, right? Because you talk about the dreaming. Like, when do you start thinking? And when do you look at a lamp? When you look at a watch, when you look at I'm just naming things around the apartment here. When you look at water and you don't say agua, abajur, relógio, you think in the language. So when you start doing that, you already don't translate to yourself. So you lose the capacity to do that. Some people's brains are set to doing the one thing. So, okay, they do a great job at, from now on, I'm gonna think in English. Let's see how they're going to be 20 years from now, or even 10 years from now. Are they gonna be more Americanized? Are they gonna have an accent? I mean, people talk about I've heard things about Mackenzie Dern, like the accent and stuff like that. People need to understand the lives that people have. I don't know what. You're bound to actually having different accents. I've had different accents, and whatever experience you have, if you have less content with Portuguese content, you really go. If you're raising a child, right, as a kid, for example, that's another thing. You start concentrating on what's going on there. What languages are spoken at home? So it depends on what you're doing. It takes away the capacity for you to actually have at 100% comprehension of a language, 100% or close to it, of another language, and be able to bridge them, because you're so focused on something you kind of forget here. When was the last time, using for my people, when was the last time so many Brazilians had to do that, to go back? I mean, the last time they translated when they were learning English. So unless you actually have that experience of translating, and again, regardless of everything I said, it is a different beast. It is an actual job. It is a function, and you actually have to learn. There's a craft to it, to be able to actually really translate the content and with as much context as possible. Different when you're actually taking a paper and putting into, translating written content or published content. When you're doing simultaneous translation, because you're not going to put emotion into it, you're just basically putting content out there. When you're dubbing is an art in Brazil. Like, we are known to be the best dubbers. I don't consume as much dub content, literally none, but the dubbing is a big thing in Brazil. Brazilian dubbers, they fit perfect sentences into as perfect as possible into American content or English consumed content or from other countries, Spanish soap operas. It's an art as well. But if you don't work in two languages, each day that you are spending in one language, you are losing a little bit of the other. So there's that. That is our daily lives. But she is a professional translator and a certified translator. It is a job. It is a job. You really have to go back into your roots, and then you have to. Yeah, I like to say, in my case, it's different than hers. I'm not sure what kind of translation she does, but I get to act. So let's use Bisping is interviewing somebody. I get to be Bisping for 20 seconds. So I try to be Bisping in Portuguese. So fighters answering, I'm that fighter for 10, 15 seconds. That's what I try to do. I try to act. I guess I'm living my dream. Since I'm not going to be a fighter, and you have to build yourself a career to be in media. You act. You actually get to act. It's I have to be those two characters. I use those times.
So, how did you get the job with the UFC?
Okay. I have a corporate life. Been working in tech and travel for quite some time. I had in the past in Brazil done a lot of translation work. When I met a lot of people that were there in my life for the past 10 years, I've had different lives, as I mentioned. I was working for a translation company in the editing side of it. When you actually get really good at it, and when you're good at content editing and good translations, you're the fine tuner. They say you're like the closer of the translation. A lot of software does things. A lot of hardworking people do the bulk of the work. They send it to you because you can actually just kind of read in sentences like, okay, no, this out of context. This would be better. This because you're the native. So I did that already, and I was always working for American companies or for companies from overseas, that the person that was coming for the sales workshops was an English speaker. So what I did was I saw one day, just kind of browsing between soccer channels in Brazil. I was like, okay, so, network television, a few channels, but the upper channels in Brazil are like religious. There's a lot of like religious content. And I saw those pastors coming from the United States, televangelists kind of. So they're just yelling whatever scripture it is, whatever their sermon. The Brazilian guy, which I was 100% sure did not speak any English, had the entire script and was doing the same thing with emotion. So the sermon was like taking not twice as long, but an hour, like 1.5 times as long. And people were engaged. And I saw the images of them being engaged with the pastor and the other, as if they were comprehending the other one. So the dynamic was working really well. I had that idea, and I actually started doing that for our workshops. So I said, I'm the product manager anyways. Give me the entire content. Let me prepare for this. Let me see if you're going to do some inside jokes. Let me just make sure that the slides behind me are all in Portuguese, because that's what the crowd is, just like for the UFC. We always say to the translators that are coming in, you hear another language, you put it into English. The audience wants to hear English. Just make sure that's the gist of it. All right. So we did that. And some people knew that I did that. As it turns out, somebody that's close to the UFC, during the pandemic, there was no local translators. Everything was being done at the Apex. Derek Kronig, who had been doing translations for 10 years or more, lives in Rio. Some of the other people, Alex Davis and Thiago Kamura, they're managers. And obviously they had to be with their people. And she knew that I had done that. I said, wait, do you know a Portuguese speaker in Vegas? So I was here, and she said, do you have that content on your resume? Yeah, send it to me. In 24 hours, someone really high up there from production got in touch with me and gave me the opportunity, and he said, saw the languages, we would really like to have that. Would you like to come for a, let's try to test you out. That was Munoz and Edgar on August 22nd, 2020. So it's been over 22 years. And they really found out about my Spanish during Contender Series, because they saw here and there was corner work that I did, but I never got to interview somebody, if I'm not mistaken. And then during Contender Series, they're like, wait, Spanish is pretty local. Good. So you become an asset, right? You really, you're like, okay, so the more the merrier. So it was just a matter of someone knowing that I did something, someone asking around to see all the Brazilian people, do you know translators? This is asked around all the time, because they go to places. How'd they find that guy in France? Did a great job, right? How'd they find Sergey, who's been doing a good job for Russian? So it all depends. So it was, they say it doesn't matter who you know, it matters who knows you. So that's what pretty much was
Fair
it.
enough. Now, let me ask this question, because you have a strong degree of humility, which is quite nice. But let me ask the question this way. So, for example, speaking of the Spanish, I showed some of your Spanish translations to my in-laws,
Okay.
and they said he checks out. They said it was good. They said it was very good. And then I noticed that some of the Portuguese, or actually not Portuguese, I'm sorry, Brazilian MMA media people that I know, they love your translation, so they check out. But the biggest one, like the real way you've connected, is the fighters, even though they don't speak whatever language you're translating for them. It seems like on the back end, they just really seem to respond to the way you translate for whatever reason. So like, what has been the key to getting all of these parties to like what you do? It's not just accurately saying what the person is saying, although that's obviously a gigantic component. Seems like there's something else in the Fabiano Buskei sauce. What is it?
Well, first of all, thank you to your in-laws, because that's the validation. I was waiting for that validation, because when you mentioned she was a translator, I was like, oh, so what did she say? What did she say?
It checked out. They liked it. They were like, he's good. He's good.
So really good when I went to San Diego, aka Tijuana Norte. It was San Diego felt like I was in Mexico. It was great, and to hear the Mexican community come to me and hear some people from certain gyms in Mexico come to me and say that I'm doing a good job. It's very important to me, especially because my Spanish was always associated with the Caribbean and South America. Mexico is different beast, and now to get to know the Mexican community, it was really appreciative. It's mind-boggling to hear that some people so far away that I haven't even met, because of the distance, because of the fact that they cover, they've been covering MMA for the longest of times, the Brazilian media, as you mentioned, to hear that I'm doing a good job from them, it's always really nice. And when people tell me that, I'm really flattered. As far as the fighters are concerned, it's amazing to be recognized by them, because that means that I'm doing a good job on there. And obviously I'm being recognized by the people internally in the UFC. That party as well exists, right? Everybody in production, public relations, everybody that's there. Otherwise, it wouldn't be asked me back. I never thought that they were going to ask me back. I was like, every week I thought I screwed up. So, all right. So, hey, maybe this is the last time. It was good while it lasted, and it just kept asking me back. So that's good. So I got that party validation. As far as the fighters are concerned, I try to connect to them as much as possible. As I said, I've been a very privileged person. I've had the love of my parents. I had two parents that were alive for quite some time. I've had the resources to learn English. I had the time, because some people can't even get an education because they have to work or do something else. And people have to grow up really fast. To actually have the privilege of using the skill that I sharpened and I'm good at, to help connect fighters whose fights have started a long, long, long time before that octagon, and will certainly last way beyond that, to an audience that is passionate and very selective in who they welcome. That in itself is a job. So the fact that I've been able to connect with them, it's really important. I understand the basics, and I'm a heavy consumer of TV content and sports content. I love sports. Sports are the ultimate art, because there's no script. There's it. I mean, we don't know, right? So I know, and I try to ask as many questions as possible if I'm doing the correct thing. I mean, to work with Megan O'Leary for those interviews, like the ones that you saw with Charles, to work with Larasenko, to the interviews that you've seen on Contender Series. I always ask the questions to the producers. This is what you want to be done. So I try to understand exactly how do I need to talk to an audience? And plus, some people on the back end are amazing to me. Just don't mention their names because I don't know if they're when their name mentioned. The fighters, it's just really internalizing. I'm having a conversation. I've always wanted to be an interesting person. I just thought be a cool thing to be in life. And I always thought that the first step towards being interesting is actually being interested in people, things, people, cultures, whatever the heck is going on. Are you interested? And I'm fascinated about what's going on. So I try to engage with them. As I said, is acting. I try to act as if I'm actually interviewing them. So I'm just getting those questions, just tweaking a couple of things because of the language and not doing a free translation with a contextual translation is very important. And I ask the question really because I want to know. And the more I learn, the more I prepare. Before I fights, I see their fights, I see how their accents are going, what things that could be done. I look at the terminology. I'm always following live blogging and the languages of the fights that are happening because to see, well, how did the media say that there? How did they put that? Because here I am, like right before I go into the octagon, I'm like scrolling to the last post, the last one. Oh, so this is how you described the submission. This is how you describe the knockout. This is how you describe the fight. I get that in my mind. I was like, okay, maybe we can use the same terminology because that's how people at home used it. So, and it connects to them. So what I've been really proud of, like a couple of examples. The Yasmin Jauregui, the Mexican, had a great fight, 23 years old, right? They say the female Brenda Moreno has a great fight with Yasmin Lucindo, a 20-year-old girl. What a life she's had. Both of them have a history of fighting for a life. And a couple of questions were asked. I actually did say a bad word to many Hispanic cultures, but a cool one to the Mexican community at the end, because I knew she had used it in the press conferences. I know that she had used the terminology and stuff. I said it, and we saw each other in the hotel. Everybody kind of gathered around in the lobby bar. And people are eating. They're getting all their food because they won their fights. And she tells me, and she was telling people around her, the way he spoke to me made me want to speak more. So I was able to make her feel more comfortable. So again, that's not just the language barrier, the cultural barrier, the moment. This is your moment. So I'm helping you out. And the Contender Series people, they come, because sometimes the first time I see them, if I don't do the feature shoots during the week, or when they actually do the interviews that you see beforehand, I'm there. So the producers actually asking the question in English, but they put me in front of the people. So when you see them answering the question, sometimes I was asking the question and I was translating back to them to say, okay, this checks out. This answer is good for what you wanted. I understand what they want in the end. Sometimes I don't get to see that. And they see me for the first time and they win their fight. I translated for corner. So they come out and they come meet Laura Sanko there, and I'm right next to her and coming. And I've heard it from a couple of fighters this season. It's like, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you. Luke, what the hell? Like, how is this possible? You just won a fight at the UFC in front of Dana White. He just like stood up, clapped, and you're coming to me. It's like, it's nice to meet you, me. So I'm honored. I mean, I can't say enough. Like, this is your moment, man. Thank you. I always see you on TV and stuff. It's like, it's insane. So, I just try to connect as much as possible. I have another life as well. I've met a lot of people from all walks of life, and I just like people. So I've been able to connect, and everyone's fascinating there. There's a lot of stories. It is a great sport. I mean, for someone who loves it, I mean, the beauty of soccer. I love football as the spectacle it is. It just consumes you. It is so many battles are happening. They're adding stuff to the broadcast. Now you can get like pretty much all 22 last night of the Chiefs and Chargers. Like I watched the all 22 on another screen at the same time I was watching the game. I mean, the UFC provides you with, let's say, a 10 fight card. You have 20 storylines, 10 battles, and another storyline of a winner, a loser, perhaps a contested win. So it gives us so much. So I'm watching it like a movie. I watched it as like playoff baseball. You might not be interested in 162 games. And not many people are in this generation, less and less every year. But what if you sit down and you watch like 2004 and you watch after the Yankees had the 3-0 Like you watch those 4 games of the Red Sox turning things around, and then you watch like 4 days in October to 30 for 30, and you're like, that's how I watched it. It made sense to me. I watch it as storylines. So I'm actually interviewing somebody that's part of the storyline when I translate to them, and when I'm talking. Sorry, I should say interview. When I'm talking to them, I'm as interested as the interviewer and the audiences. So it pays off. It really been able to connect with them, and they're really amazing people.
Yeah, they certainly are. We're up against time, so I'm going to end the interview with this question, which is two-parter. One, you mentioned you're getting recognized here. I would imagine your profile has grown in Brazil as well. I'd be curious to know if you know it, like to what extent you've got a degree of popularity there. But two, more than that, like life is full of surprises. The older you get, like life takes you in unexpected directions no matter what. Is there a part of you that's like, I don't know, coming from Brazil, living here, being able to work in your native language, even though you don't need it, you're utterly fluent in English, some sort of like cultural reconnection in some kind of way? Like, how do you feel about this sort of, is it full circle to you that now at this stage in your life, you're sort of back working in Portuguese in an interesting way?
That's a very good question. To answer the first one, yes, I know, because people are, and again, I'm not a famous person. I have time in my hands, and I do apologize to people that I take too long to respond. But every time someone tries to send a message to me or to reach me on, so I mean, whether it's Twitter messages that end up in a tab that you can't find because they're being flagged, Instagram messages they have to approve, LinkedIn stuff, Facebook messages, people send messages to me, and I try to answer them all. And I noticed that there's a lot of people from Brazil that say, "Oh, man," they say things like the sweetest things. They say, "Me and my family we're watching," or "I love what you do," which is insane because it's I say, hugs to everyone. So I try to engage with everyone. So that's I've noticed. Yes, I'm not sure about famous, but I don't know if I get to go to So UFC in Brazil? Oh no, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, especially it's been like on steroids in the past couple of months. I was in Brazil for Christmas and New Year's. I came back and I worked at one point 12 consecutive shows in 13 weeks, break for Memorial Day, and I had my busiest month in the UFC in August. There, like I have the logs of everything that I did. Like, oh my God, I worked every week, all week long. So, yes, I do feel exactly what you said. I think it's fascinating, even as far as professional, full-time jobs. That's what I'm looking for. I've changed even the way that I look at my career. I am good at this. At using the languages. I'm not saying translation. I'm not saying. I know that you have to find something that you're good at, right? And if you find it, however, I'm 44 now. When you find that you can actually do that, it's like, listen, I have that skill set. That's what I mean. So I look for jobs that are Latin America based. Latin America focused. That involve relationships, that involve growing the business via understanding both sides. I am pretty commercially oriented anyway, so that helped. So it has been a reconnection, and it has reshaped the way I've thought of my career. Obviously, it's great. As you said, I can definitely cover the United States territory, but I know I have the skill set. So why not go for that? Because I'm very happy doing that. I'm very happy connecting people, actually connecting the cultures and being able to grow business from Latin America. Plus, there's a lot of potential. So yes, it has. You are right. I've reconnected with a lot of elements from all the cultures that, you forget here and there. As I said, it's very easy to forget any other country during football season. Very, very easy to forget. And this year, look at the overload. The UFC has got a great Q3 and Q4 coming up. We are in, football's just getting thicker by the minute. And we have a World Cup in November and December. What in the world? We're going to need the bigger boat. It's going to be something. I don't know, man. How are we going to deal with this? Thanksgiving morning, right? Is it the U.S. against England on Thanksgiving morning?
Something like that, yeah.
And then we get to see the Cowboys lose again on Thanksgiving, which is great. And then it's just amazing. So yeah, but I have reconnected. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm very delighted to hear it. I'm so glad you made some time for me. We could talk for a much longer. Hopefully we can connect again in the future. You do a great job. And this interview was requested by people who have been talking to me like, dude, you got to talk to that guy. You got to talk to that guy. So here it is. I'm talking to you. Great job, man. Really appreciate your time. And I will see you on the UFC broadcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, much appreciated. And you know, it pains me to say, but you know, Hala Madrid for a lot of things. You got Vinicius Jr. He's a really good guy there. And take care. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Great card coming up this weekend.